All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Eileen. I am the Outreach and Volunteer Coordinator here at NAMI Miami-Dade. And we're so excited to have both Heather Winters and Officer Dany Miralles here with us today on our Ask the Expert on Miami-Dade Police Department's Crisis Response Unit, responding to persons in crisis and community connections. Like I previously said, if you have any questions throughout today's conversation, feel free to write it in the chat. We want to be mindful also of everyone's time. So we'll have all questions at the end, and hopefully we're able to get through them all. I'm going to go ahead and read some bios for tonight's speakers. Heather Winters is a licensed mental health counselor with 25 years of experience in the mental health and human services field, including 15 years in senior administrative roles. She has extensive experience in program development and management, strategic planning, and executive management. Heather began her career working at the Psychiatric Institute of Southern Illinois following completion of her bachelor's degree in psychology from Southern Illinois University. She graduated from the University of Miami in 2000 with a master's degree in mental health counseling. Following graduation, her work as a therapist, including providing intensive home and school-based therapeutic services to children and adolescents. She worked with the Journey Institute, providing individual and group counseling to child, adolescent, and adult survivors of sexual violence. Heather then joined the team at the Family Counseling Services of Greater Miami when it acquired the Journey Institute. Heather also maintained a private practice from 2007 to 2012, where she provided individual, family, and group counseling. Her areas of specialization include trauma, PTSD, anxiety, and depression. In addition, Heather served as an executive director of Family Counseling Services from 2012 to 2014. From 2014 to 2016, she served as a senior director of the Family Counseling Services Division following the organization's merger with Switchboard of Miami, Inc. From 2016 to 2018, Ms. Winters served as the executive director of the Melissa Institute for Violence Prevention and Treatment. Ms. Winters joined Jewish Community Services of South Florida, Inc. in 2018 and served in the positions of Division Director of Children's Behavioral Health and Helpline Services and Chief Programs Officer. She has worked closely with key community partners, stakeholders, and funders over the years and has represented the nonprofit community on numerous advisory boards, councils, and collaborative partnerships. In 2023, Ms. Winters joined the Miami-Dade Police Department's Mental Health and Wellness Bureau Community Health Section. She works with the Crisis Response and Threat Management units and serves as a mental health consultant for the department's crisis negotiator team. And Officer Dany Miralles in 2011 commenced his career in the field of law enforcement with the City of Coral Gables Police Department as a police identification technician, working with fingerprints and photographic identifications. In 2012, Officer Miralles continued his path in the law enforcement forensic field with the City of Doral Police Department as a crime scene investigator, where he had the honor of working alongside the Federal Bureau of Investigations Task Force and the South Florida Biohazardous Investigations Response Team. In 2016, Officer Miralles attended the Miami-Dade College School of Justice Police Academy, successfully completing and becoming a police officer with the City of Doral Police Department. During his tenure, Officer Miralles held various positions which included police instructor, where he had the honor of developing the department's homeless outreach liaison and CIT crisis intervention team coordinator programs with the Miami-Dade County Homeless Trust and 11th Judicial Circuit Miami-Dade County's Criminal Mental Health Project. In 2019, he was assigned to the department's General Investigations Unit as a police detective, investigating various persons, property, violent crimes, and incidents involving mental health, involuntary Baker Act, Marchman Act incidents, and risk protection orders. Additionally, he was tasked with the duties of serving as the department's liaison to the Miami Dignitary Division Team and Southern Command Admiral Criminal Investigation Division. In 2021, Officer Miralles honorably joined the Miami-Dade Police Department as a police officer. While continuing to provide public service and assistance to the community, in May of 2023, Officer Miralles had the privilege of joining the department's inaugural crisis response unit, utilizing his experience and training to assist persons in crisis and or those experiencing mental health issues. Heather, I don't know if you want to start off by saying anything while I go ahead and share my screen for your presentation.
Sure, thank you. I know that was a mouthful. I just want to say good evening to everyone and welcome, and thank you so much for joining our talk this evening, so we can showcase the great work of our crisis response unit and hopefully inform you about the work that we're doing, where this is being provided, and help you better understand the goals and the mission of the crisis response unit in serving persons in crisis, as well as helping individuals get connected to community resources and developing those strong partnerships with the various community partners, which we have so many. So we are pleased to be here this evening. So first, want to tell you a little bit about what is the Crisis Response Unit. The Crisis Response Unit launched in May of 2023. And the purpose was to, provide assistance to persons in crisis. So anybody that we serve through the Crisis Response Unit, it's in response to calls coming through 911 dispatch. And so that includes individuals who appear to be in crisis, having a mental health condition and or struggling with substance use problems, and or suicidal individuals. Our officers are specially trained. They received 160 hours of training specific for this unit. They go through a rigorous process to join the crisis response unit. It begins with an interview process in which candidates are selected, and then they are evaluated as a result of that interview process. And then those individuals that are selected to go to what we call our crisis response unit school go through that 160 hours of specialized training during that process. They take pre and post test measures to see what they are learning, how they are performing, and there are evaluations that take place throughout the CRU school. And then we take an overall combination rating of the interview process, the scores from the interviews, as well as how they perform during the CRU school to develop our eligibility list and select the officers that will join the specialized unit. And Dany, I don't know if you want to chime in and say anything about what that experience is like.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for allowing me and Heather to participate in your NAMI's ongoing events and stuff. So basically what we cover within 160 hours is obviously we try to cover the basics of CIT material, crisis intervention team material, to refresh us from things that may be up to date to some of us. I took CIT back in 2016. Some things kind of changed. And then we started going into the basics of police work and training. This involved tactics, officer safety, the safety of others, properly searching, approaching situations, how to divert, identify. So we kind of go more into the basics, and we slowly escalates to the more fine tuning of things to make sure that we cover things beyond minimal and as best as possible. So we're projectably prepared with our experience and retraining that we come as regular officers, but then the ones that we also gain during the CRU training to be accessible and have the proper tools. So when we respond to calls, there is no situation of certain capacities, everything expandable, everything's uncontrolled. So we try to be ready for situations and unforeseen circumstances as well. So that's a little bit what the training covers. But aside of that, we also do continuous training, whether it's classroom training with Heather on updated mental health that we don't really see from the professional side, or we implement refresher in our tactics and part of things that we covered during our CRU 160 hours. And just if we experience a case by case from one or three squadrons throughout Miami-Dade County, maybe one squad in the northern for the western or the south had an experience or a certain case that they like to dispose to the unit and kind of like refresh it and fine tune it so we become familiar with that situation should another officer perceive it. So it's just constant training and refreshing the knowledge, and also mental health check for ourselves. We got to make sure that we're good on that. So it's just recurrent as time comes.
Thank you. And Eileen, if you'll go to the next slide. And I want to highlight the goal of the crisis response unit is to de-escalate, assess, and divert those in crisis to behavioral health resources in a safe, humane, and compassionate manner. So we work with numerous community partners to ensure individuals, whether they're taken to a receiving facility or just in need of referrals for services, get connected to those resources. In addition to not only responding to calls for service, we also conduct follow-ups. And if you'll go to the next slide. And through that process, in responding to the calls, conducting the follow-ups, and staying in contact with the individual and or their family members, we obviously want to enhance overall quality of life. You know, what are the needs? What are the needs of the individual? What are the needs of family members, and how we can connect them to those resources, whether they be resources for mental health services and or any other social service needs that they may encounter, whether it be food, housing, childcare. We really work to make sure that the needs are met. We also can't do this work without our community partners, right? So we have very strong relationships with many community providers and are continuously seeking to enhance and strengthen those relationships. We start with the communities in which the CR units provide services, which now is in 3 districts. That includes our South District in Deep South Dade, Miami-Dade County. It includes our North Side District and also the Hammocks District. So we will go out as a unit, officers will go and they will visit the various community providers and get to know the individuals, let them know that CRU is present, talk to them about the work provided through the crisis response unit, as well as gain a better understanding of all the various programs and services offered through the organizations. We can't do this work alone. It takes a network, and that is with our, mental health, substance use providers, our faith community, you name it. And we're always looking to make more and more contacts so we can ensure that the needs of our community members are being met. You can go to the next slide for me. And then obviously we also want to reduce the stigma, not only reduce the stigma around mental health, but also having that police law enforcement presence, responding to these calls. And so one of the things that we like to highlight about our crisis response unit is, unlike traditional road officers, our crisis response unit are able to stay on scene for as long as it takes to de-escalate and stabilize the situation. It is very common practice for us to be out on calls for service, and we'll be with the individual and or family members for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours plus, until we ensure that individual is connected to the resources needed, and we're able to ensure that it's a safe scene and the situation is de-escalated. So in addition to the specialized training that the officers receive in the unit, also that time that they're able to spend really makes a difference in the overall outcome. We are a co-responder model, and as such, our team is made up of our crisis response unit police officers, mental health clinicians, and paramedics from fire rescue. One of our paramedics is an advanced registered nurse practitioner with specialization in psychiatry. And the other one is currently in the doctorate of nursing program and they serve as our clinicians and paramedics. So we're also able to assess physical health needs, really kind of evaluate what's going on. And oftentimes we are there on scene before fire rescue may show up in the event that we need to dispatch fire rescue. And, you know, the benefit of that is sometimes it's really difficult to tease out what we have, you know, presenting in front of us, whether it's a mental health condition, whether there is some kind of physical condition or physical health issue for which the person may be experiencing symptoms that may mirror or mimic a mental health condition, or if we're dealing with an individual who's under the influence of substances. So Dany, I don't know if you want to share anything a little further about that co-responder team and what that looks like in action.
Well, actually, as I was hearing you provide useful information and such minimal stuff that we can talk about this for 3-4 hours, the amount of stuff that we're doing in co-partnership with Heather, linking us with the professional side, because communication lacks everywhere you go. It doesn't matter if it's police or private sector. So having somebody that can combine communications, and we are the link between the environment and the public of mental health with the professionals. If we don't have the point of context, if we don't have the resources, we can only assess and evaluate the unforeseen crisis. But what happens after that? And that's when we come into doing our co-partners with our two clinicians and Heather, the follow-ups, because we like to see that what happened after we transported to the crisis facility, if indeed that individual met the state criteria for Baker Act, which is solely mental health, or substance abuse, which is Marchman Act. What happens after that? That you get the proper resources. Sometimes we have to speak to those family members if the person that indeed needed the assistance is not capable or comprehending or has a developmental function that, you know, you can't create a dialogue with and follow up with. So with that being said, I saw some questions in the chat about also with the mobile response team. That's one of our greatest outsources. Sometimes our clinicians may not be available because there's only 2, and we have mostly the entire Miami-Dade County to cover in 3 areas. These guys are busy doing other things and doing follow-ups. So sometimes the mobile response team it's a great aspect to our unit, because we can call them, give them the information, and one of those things is that we inform them that as officers we'll maintain the presence until they arrive, until they do their assessment on scene, and if they need us for further, we'll transport if transport is too far of a distance, because at the end of the day we want to reduce the fear and stigma that a person in crisis is experiencing. So that's one of our prime goals on a daily basis in every single call. So that's some of the stuff that we're really prime on a daily basis.
So I'll take that opportunity to jump in because of the questions around that is obviously West Care, the Village South, who operates our mobile response team in here in Miami-Dade County, is one of our core partners. And the question we often get is about, you know, that continuum of care across the crisis response system. So there are many entry points to that crisis response system. For example, calls coming in through 911 dispatch, that would be routed to our crisis response unit officers if they are on shift and they are working and it meets the criteria that we discussed for CRU. Mobile response team has their own helpline, 1-800-HELP-U. And so calls going directly to mobile response team will dispatch their licensed clinicians, who also go out with a peer specialist to respond to calls for services. We do communicate frequently, like Dany said, Officer Miralles said, if they are in need of law enforcement presence, they will call upon us, and we have called upon them as well. And we stay in communication about, you know, what's working well with that collaboration. Another point of entry for the crisis response system is 211. Jewish Community Services of South Florida, through their contact center, answers the line for 211 and 988. 211 providing information and referral resources for individuals with any type of human service, social service need. And 988 is answered by specially trained helpline counselors that operates 24/7, being able to de-escalate and work with individuals who are experiencing a crisis and or are suicidal. Now, through the contact center at Jewish Community Services answering for 211 and 988, they will dispatch the mobile response team when needed, when it's identified that they need somebody to go out and do an in-person, face-to-face assessment by a licensed mental health clinician. They will only dispatch law enforcement as a last resort, and that is when there is obviously an imminent danger of harm to oneself or somebody else, and or, possession of a weapon or something like that, that would warrant a law enforcement response. So we're all working very collaboratively together to support individuals in need in our community. There are many specialty helplines and warm lines that exist. Obviously, NAMI has their warm line, or I'm sorry, their helpline that is available for individuals to call needing to speak to someone or have questions about mental health, how to respond, and I'll let them speak more about that. But there is a network of specialty lines, to assist people who are struggling and need somebody to talk to. The other thing that I wanted to highlight, if you'll go to the next slide for me, Eileen, is our crisis response unit. Also, we wear a different uniform than the traditional Miami-Dade Police Department brown uniform. Dany has his uniform on. If you've noticed, he is wearing a blue top. And they also drive unmarked vehicles because we want to be sensitive to when we're responding to persons in need of service, how we approach. The lights on the vehicles are different than our traditional green and whites, and we're very mindful about that. And since we've been operating in May of 2023 in select communities, the 3 districts we mentioned, South, North Side, and Hammocks, community members are getting familiar when they see us approach, and they're like, oh, here comes the crisis response unit again. And they know that these officers are specially trained. They know that they're able to spend those hours on scene when needed. And so they are seen as a great resource and a benefit to the community. So who all do we assist? Obviously, we mentioned it's calls coming through 911 dispatch, but specifically it's calls for individuals who are experiencing a crisis. It can be related to a mental health issue or not. Individuals with serious mental illness, which may include diagnoses, for example, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder. Individuals who are suicidal, who are either just having thoughts of suicide or who may be in the process of acting on those suicidal thoughts. We also respond to calls for individuals who may be on the autism spectrum disorder or have other neurodevelopmental disorders. And finally, individuals with Alzheimer's disease or other age-related neurocognitive disorders. So it's not uncommon for us to also be dispatched or called out to other organizations or facilities, such as an assisted living facility or an independent living facility, or some of these other organizations who may be working with individuals that when they are experiencing a crisis or may become combative or difficult to deal with, we are called out to respond to those situations as well. Next slide for me. So who all is part of our crisis response team? So as we mentioned early on, we are part of the Mental Health and Wellness Bureau within Miami-Dade's Police Department under the Community Mental Health section. Community Mental Health section, in addition to our crisis response unit, also includes our threat management unit. We currently have 3 squads of CRU officers, which includes 24 officers in total, 8 officers per squad. We have 1 lieutenant. We have 3 sergeants, a sergeant attached to each squad. Myself, the community mental health manager, and our 2 paramedics and who also serve as clinicians from Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, who are part of the Miami-Dade Police Department's team. We are also going to be hiring 3 licensed mental health clinicians, and those positions should be posted soon, and we will have that licensed clinician attached to each squad, in addition to our clinicians, paramedics from Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, now working closely with the officers and conducting the follow-ups with the individuals and or families. When we conduct follow-ups, we're able to go visit individuals at the crisis stabilization units or receiving facilities or their homes, wherever is most convenient and depending on where they are at that time. We try to follow up initially while they are still in the unit, and then we continue to conduct those follow-ups either via phone and or in person. Next slide. So here is our contact information if you'd like to reach out to Officer Miralles or myself, or if you have any further questions after this, or if you'd like to schedule us to come visit if you work at a community mental health organization or substance use treatment facility, you'd like us to come out and visit. And or we also welcome organizations and providers to come and present at our monthly in-service trainings. We will be going out and presenting to large groups, probably organized through some of the major funders in our community who fund mental health and substance use treatment provider organizations, and talking to groups about what CRU is doing and how we may collaborate and partner. And Dany, I'm going to turn it over to you because I would like you to share information and showcase your nice vehicle there.
Okay, thank you. To discuss about the vehicle, that's what you want me to discuss?
Sure.
Okay. So as you can see, the appearance of the vehicle, the approach should lower the stigma, should lower the fear, because when somebody is called upon a crisis situation, most likely the person's going to be alerted that yes, 911 was called by the significant other, a next of kin, a family member, a legal guardian, etc. So when they hear the sirens, they're gonna hear the sirens. They're gonna expect police to come. They're gonna look out for the uniform. They're already getting into that paranoia state of mind of what to expect. Oh, considering that the person may have a past experience with police officers, whether we were working or not, that's unverbal. So they're expecting the white vehicles, whether it's an SUV or a sedan, they come with the green stripes representing Miami-Dade Police Department. So they look for those things. And also, sometimes it's embarrassing for certain individuals, especially when they go into the crisis mode, because when they see the police show up, and for officer safety, it's a minimum of 2 officers per call. So us as a CR unit, we respond in multitude. Officer safety is more paramount to provide the most appropriate care for the person, families, and the public health. So we respond. We have 8 members in our unit, like Heather was discussing. So sometimes we respond as appropriate as possible. So our minimal response is 3-4 times officers at a time. But and regular patrol officers, regular uniform patrol officer responds in the same multitude. So you may gonna get an overwhelming presence, that tactical approach, but at the end of the day, it's not that the person should fear that, but again, they don't have the comprehension to see that aspect of it. So then they might fear again a previous encounter, whether it's positive or negative. So by us approaching in vehicles that are marked, if we best feel that the person or some information was brought to us that the person usually happens with individuals with autism, they don't like to see the lights, they don't like to see the sirens. So if we get that information based on what description of the call was narrated from the police communications, we kind of have that training. Okay, guys, we can make prior to the call, don't use your sirens, don't use your lights, because it might be a stigma to the person we're going to assist. So it's a great approach. It's been very respected by the community, how we approach. They don't even know it's the police at times until they come out. And when they see the blue and gray uniform, they still don't know it's a police. So until they see our insignias on our shirt and it says Miami-Dade Police Department in the back, and we get the approach and we start the dialogue, that's a barrier that we have to build, because now the person was not expecting an unmarked vehicle to approach, wasn't expecting a police officer to approach in a different uniform or capacity. So now we got to go through that barrier of, we're here to help you, make it comfortable. And once we pass that barrier, now we start trying to build that dialogue. Again, case by case basis, because as sometimes a person that's in crisis cannot have that cognitive ability to comprehend or listen or understand what's going on. So these are all barriers that we try to overcome, and as we take more and more calls for service, we become more experienced. So the vehicle is a great approach. I hope it stays like that. I think we're gonna continue to stay like that. The uniform makes it comfortably, so we don't have um that civilian attire. And unfortunately, we do have to wear our police gear. We do have to wear our safety vests, our ballistic vests, our duty belt. Obviously, we have to wear our firearms. So we don't want to make it seem that we're also in the undercover capacity, which may lead to investigation. And again, sometimes persons with lived experiences, we're responding to calls for service, also may have a criminal past. So they may have a post-traumatic stress disorder moment where they say, "Oh my God, I got arrested last week for some pettiness," or domestic violence is a huge factor in mental health nowadays. So that's the thing, that by altering our uniform, our vehicle provides that cognitive sign of, oh, let me pause and assess and recognize. And then that's when they start hearing the dialogue and us talking and stuff like that. And then they have a calming, soothing way. So again, it's a great approach. How we respond to call for services. And I know there was something on the chat that how do we get these unmarked vehicles to respond to us? I'm just gonna cover that really briefly. You can call our office. Feel free to email me, myself, or Heather, and call our offices. But when we need the police services, we always say call 911 first. Obviously, whether it's an emergency or not, the call taker, the police communication call taker, will divert the call if it's non-emergency to non-emergency desk. If it's an emergency, to the immediate dispatchers. And the reason why we direct police emergency communication services first is because situation distinct. The communication dispatchers have a protocol which they have to follow. All the calls are monitored because there might be a tentative word used. They're going to ask a multitude of questions. So it's best to have as much information as possible being related to the 911 communications officer, so they are able to properly relate it to us, the crisis response unit, and regular uniform patrol officers. So we always refer that the best way to do is call 911, a non-emergency officer. But if it's more on a follow-up case or a clinical case-by-case basis, or sometimes one needs referrals, please feel free to call our office. And our office also links to three other services in our bureau: the threat management, mental health services, the psychological bureau as well. So that's to answer that question there. So
So I saw a question in the chat earlier about kind of walk us through what happens on a call. So basically a call may come in through 911 dispatch, and dispatchers have a set of questions that they will then distinguish if the crisis response unit needs to be raised. Crisis response unit is in operation on shift. Then call goes out, crisis response unit is dispatched to the location. And as Officer Miralles said earlier, minimum 3 to 4 officers typically go on call, along with clinician, arrive on scene. And obviously, you know, we assess what we have, just like we would for any other, you know, call for service, and immediately engage with the individual, who we are, why we're there, obviously there to help provide assistance, and really try to gather what's going on, let the person talk, let them get it out. And obviously utilizing all the training and then the skills and the tools in terms of, you know, de-escalation, active listening, crisis intervention when needed, but really just trying to gather all the information so we know what we have presenting in front of us. And then because we respond with multiple officers and clinician, we're able then to also, if there's a family member present, meet with that family member, gather some more information, you know, find out what is the history, what led up to 911 being contacted. Is there any mental health history? Is the individual taking any medications? If so, what are those medications? You know, really trying to dissect what is happening, what led to this situation, and what is needed right now in the, you know, the immediate situation. And then because we're able to kind of split off and talk with different individuals, obviously when safe to do so, right? gather all that information. And like we said, stay on scene as long as we need to, talking with that individual, waiting until they're de-escalated, and really kind of talking through and strategizing when appropriate is what are next steps, making them a part of that process to the extent possible when safe to do so. If we see there's obviously, imminent threat, individual needs to be taken into custody and transported to a crisis stabilization unit, then obviously, that is the route that'll be taken, but that's not like the automatic, right? As a result of the training that we talked about and the time spent on scene, we really have seen a reduction in the overall number of situations in which the individual is taken in for an involuntary evaluation and assessment. We are able to divert in a lot of situations. There isn't a need necessarily to go to the crisis stabilization unit, but there is a need for an immediate, intake, assessment, referral for services. And so that is what we were able to provide and assist with. Then following, that interaction, obviously, we have our documentation, writing the reports, get the individual stabilized. If needed, transported to the receiving facility. We stay on scene at the receiving facility until that, individual is officially handed over to the staff and it's safe for us to leave. We will provide and share information that's going to be useful for staff at the receiving facility to take over that case and provide that evaluation and assessment process. And then, like I said, we will follow up and check in with the individual, see how they're doing. The purpose of that obviously is, are they stabilized? What's happening? Do we need to do any advocacy with the treatment facility to, advocate on their behalf to make sure that they are, properly getting the treatment and the services that they need and that all the information exchange is happening? And then follow up with them when they get discharged in terms of what was that discharge plan? What does that include? Do they have the correct phone numbers? Were they able to call and make an appointment? Did they reach anyone? Do they have transportation for that appointment? If they did go to a follow-up appointment, what was that experience like for them? Are they happy with those services? We really want to ensure everything is in place. So the number of follow-ups really varies individual to individual. It may be a one-time follow-up and that's all that's needed, or in some cases, we've done follow-ups 3, 4, 5+ times to really ensure that advocacy is happening to get that person linked with the necessary resources. And, bottom line, the mission through that entire process is really, treating people with dignity and respect and, really just hearing them out to ensure that they are getting the help that they need. And oftentimes that's also linking family members with resources, whether that's support groups or services for themselves. That's important too, because we know that, individuals who have a strong support network and have somebody advocating on their behalf fare much better. Individuals who don't have that connection and don't have that support, it's often a lot more challenging and a lot more difficult.
This has been amazing. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen just so I can see if there's any questions in the chat for you all. But I think one thing that stood out to me the most was you talking about how it's a co-partnership, not only between yourselves on your team, but also with all the other organizations that you are able to provide their resources, such as us. Here at NAMI, we are all about education and support and advocating. And, we have our support groups and educational programs, and knowing that you're able to provide those resources to the community is great. I'm going to see here if there's any other questions that may have been skipped over. So I see a question here that says, which maybe you can answer if it's something that you've come across. Have you experienced a lack of beds for mental health issues when transporting? I'm assuming that's what the question is.
I would say on initial transport, no. Where we do see a lack of beds at times is individuals in need of residential treatment services, longer term inpatient care, for example. And when we're working with individuals who are unhoused or, homeless and in need of shelter placement, that is often a struggle.
Great, okay. And then I see another question here that says, is a CIT officer the same as a CSU officer?
And I think, did that mean maybe different than a CRU? Different than,
Yeah,
I
maybe,
think that's
yeah.
what they
Yeah,
probably meant. So CIT, Crisis Intervention Team Training, is a 40-hour training that officers throughout the department go through, which does cover various topics on, mental health, substance use, working with persons in crisis, community resources, just to name a few. And the crisis response unit officers, in addition to that 40-hour training, get an additional 120 hours of advanced crisis intervention and de-escalation training. And also, as Officer Miralles noted, we have monthly in-service. So we have a full day of monthly in-service, which includes just information, instruction, like classroom style on mental health related topics, practicing, going through some scenarios, breaking down cases, what went well, what could be improved upon, and also the defensive tactical training that Officer Miralles mentioned to ensure, officer safety and safety of the individuals and persons on scene when we're responding to calls, because, there are some situations, not the norm, but some situations that can be very volatile or high risk scenes.
Okay. And I have one last question here. Do you see crisis calls for families, or is it more just for individuals?
Call originates as related to an individual, but as you can probably imagine, just like, we ourselves are going through crisis, it affects those around us, right? And our family. So often we get on scene, and you may be responding to a call related to a child, and mother, caregiver, parental figure is upset, is distraught. Maybe there's been some kind of conflict, domestic related issues, where you need to talk to multiple parties, multiple individuals. So yeah, it's frequently not just the individual. When we're called out to respond to an organization or facility, staff may be involved, other residents, patients, may be involved. And so it's really responding to usually various individuals, but the call originates around one, individual who's experiencing some type of crisis or has some type of need. Officer Miralles, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Absolutely. I do want to add that majority of the calls that we receive, something that some believe there might be less than more than enough. We actually receive a lot of high volume calls from individuals experiencing from a mental health disorder or a crisis situation. And how they contact us, well, they have to have the communication means. So sometimes they have cell phones, sometimes they don't. They go to a bystander, or they'll go to a business or a neighbor. So there is a lot of times that we are responding to calls for service and consisting of mental health from individuals themselves calling. And myself, I can actually tell when the individual who's calling, because sometimes we get bits and pieces and misconstrued information from when the call taker takes the information and then puts it out on the communication radio or via our dispatching mobile laptops. You can kind of tell the amount of information being transcribed. It's an individual that knows best. The only other person that can know so much information about the mental health, medications, diagnosis, stuff like that, it's a kin or a next family member or immediate family members. So sometimes we can say that sometimes the complainant, what the dispatchers call, or the reporting person, it's unknown who's calling. I can kind of tell, and my team can tell, is based on the information again that's being transcribed, sufficing our presence to the call. Most likely is going to be an individual. but majority of the calls do come from immediate family members, spouses, next of kins. Like Heather mentioned, we do respond to independent living facilities, assisted living facilities. Yesterday we had 3 calls with adult living facilities within an hour. And again, we're able to recognize some of these locations. Sometimes we respond to court hearing same addresses. We kind of know that the call doesn't suffice or have any mental health components, but we already know the dwelling or the domicile or the family members and recognize the boundaries of where that home might be located, that we know, okay, we dealt with this individual last month or yesterday or in the last couple of hours. So we kind of always have to monitor the police communication constantly to recognize that, hey, this may not be a regular call for patrol, and it doesn't hurt for our team, nevertheless, to respond and assist other officers. And if it doesn't determine to be a mental health call, at least we're there, we're present for other questions that may arise. And at the end of the day, I also wanted to add that every call that the crisis response unit goes to, whether they take primary on the investigation, they're there to assist us, whoever, we always finish or end the call by providing a case number, which has the police number, which a report will be documented on, or have the information that we put to our office, or have the officer's name, the address where it occurred, immediate information. Additionally to that, we provide on every single call, again, our community mental health resource flyers, which is a lot of the resources that Heather spoke about. It covers 988, I'm sorry, 211. It has our mobile response team information, the 1-800 number, or 1-800 help you. It has the Monroe number. It has also core services number, I believe there, and it has
NAMI.
NAMI's information. It has NAMI. So it's a great flyer. I speak about it yesterday. I had another conference yesterday and I presented it because these are ideas that sometimes, like I'm saying, communication doesn't bond and there's misconceptions. So the more that we can publicize, the more that the providers can give, especially to law enforcement officers, providing the immediate crisis treatment and the mental health or miscellaneous. It's always good to have more information than have none. Because that's where a lot of lacking happens. We go out to these families and they say, yeah, they say my son, my daughter has been Baker acted in the past, but nobody's ever told me about 211 or 988, or we also provide petitioning court services when a family member we suggest or endure or recommend that they should go petition post-crisis, because remember the crisis only deals with de-escalating that point in moment, but majority of the effect in mental health is long-term. So we suggest that it's best that immediately this and a family member or legal guardian can start the petitioning process with the level the additional court services mental health project to go petition, because they're the best component of it. Again, we want to provide information as far as what occurs so they can present it on their formatting to petition for the judge in a hearing. So we also provide that information. So we get that respective feedback that the unit's actually doing what it does and what it's prone, and it's a lot more than what we're doing because it's information, it's the linking, it's the providers giving us information or learning about new aspects through our monthly classroom lecture with Heather or NAMI coming in, or the Veterans Affairs. So it's always nonstop, and that information, our team takes it and we give it out. And not only do we give it out to those individuals or calls that we're responsible, we give it to other officers. I have officers call me from other departments all the time. I have officers call me from other districts telling me, hey, I have a person in this. Can you email me this? Can you send me a picture? And that's where the communication starts. And, and it trends. So I just want to add that every call that CRU responds to, and before we depart, we want to make sure that we provide the direct contacts, the direct sources of direct information, because eventually, unfortunately, it's going to happen again. And we see those things, we see it working because, for example, we'll have a collaboration with DCF calls CRU because they already know CRU. We had an interaction with CRU in the past, or the mobile response team requests sometimes CRU by specifications to assist in a call and things like that. Or sometimes a family member calls and says they're requesting a CRU officer available. So we monitor all those things that we know that based on what the communications is dispatching calls for service, that we know that the information we have provided in the past is effective and it's working. So I just want to add that we do provide the resources, and we see the significance of less calls for service and mental health with the same recurrent lived experience individual or households. So yes.
That's great. I'm glad that oh, Heather, you were
Oh, I was
gonna.
just gonna say, I just saw in the chat, we do have a flyer, so I can share it with NAMI to send out to everyone who registered for tonight's event.
If anyone has any last minute questions, if you want to put that into the chat. Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't share that, the officers in this unit are very dedicated and passionate about what they do. They signed up for this because it's draws at their heart in some way. And unlike traditional road unit officers, these are the only kinds of calls that this unit responds to. So day in and day out, they are responding to, calls for service for people in crisis. And, obviously that takes a toll, and that's why, our monthly in-service and training is so important, that we take care of them, right? Take care of the helpers who are, responding to people in need in our community. But these are the only types of calls they respond to. And I think that's something that is noteworthy. And I wanted to also to share with everyone, it takes a very special kind of person, and we have a excellent unit and group of officers and sergeants and lieutenant and all the way up to captain and major in our bureau, and just very dedicated group of individuals doing what they can day in and day out to help others.
Yeah, you all have an amazing team, and we are very, very grateful for all of you, honestly, and we know that you're growing, which it's great to hear as well. Officer Miralles, did you have any final thoughts before we end today's meeting?
No, I think I saw a message about, is there a CRU or a similar unit in Monroe County? I believe that was one of the questions that was asked in the chat a while back. From my understanding and collaboration with other agencies and officers that have inquired about the unit because they've seen our presence or they heard about it from other officers or myself or in service training, there's talks about other municipalities, other nearing sheriff's office like BSO Monroe, expressing how the unit has a potential unit would like to be built. But just to say Miami-Dade Police Department solely in Southeast Florida or South Florida period is the only crisis response unit dedicated of highly trained officers in mental health to respond to probably those type of calls. So that answers the question. But again, reach out to your community, reach out to your local municipalities, police departments, and express them that these types of services are needed in your community, because if they don't know, or sometimes they may know, but sometimes they need a little bit more support from the community, and get in there and speak to your command staff in whatever municipality and let them know that the community really needs units like CRU, and I'm sure that when the community sees and express and gets that concept of receptive that Miami-Dade Police Department is providing, I'm sure they'll take that into consideration and probably potentially build one. So that's to cover that question.
That's great. Thank you so much. I want to thank you both again, Heather and Officer Miralles, for being here and covering this the crisis response unit, and talking more to us and giving us all this information. That it's been extremely helpful, and I can see in the chat everyone is very grateful and happy that they joined and we're able to get so much out of tonight's speaker meeting. So I want to thank you both for taking the time, as well as everyone else who has joined us for taking time out of your evening to join us on this meeting. Again, there's our resources are in the chat. If you were looking through the chat, we dropped a lot of different resources and dates for events that we'll be having. And again, we're so happy that you were able to join us. And we'll go ahead and end our meeting there. And thank you again. And we hope you all have a great night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Night.